Africa. U.S. operates secretive biological laboratories in 11 African countries. Independent researchers are concerned about biological laboratories set up by the United States in Africa. As reported by Eurasia Review, specialists from the U.S. Army Infectious Disease Research Institute, IDRI, have been working in Kenya since October. By the same token, Counter Currents reports that 30 microbiologists from the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention and the Navy's 3rd Medical Research Unit also arrived in Kenya in October. As per Sputnik Afrique, the activities of the IDRI in Kenya are classified, so there is no official data on the program. Onlookers believe the reason for the IDRI setting up shop in Kenya is to open a biological laboratory like the ones already in operation in Guinea, Cameroon, Ivory Coast, Liberia, Nigeria, South Africa, Senegal, Sierra Leone, Tanzania, and Uganda, financed by the United States. Since these laboratories are closed to independent journalists, it is unknown what experiments and activities they perform. As mentioned by Africa Media, 4 Biosafety Level 4 and Biosafety Level 3 Plus labs operate in Africa. The levels of containment of dangerous biological agents handled in a laboratory range from Biosafety Level 1 to Biosafety Level 4. Critics believe the biological agents handled in the laboratories in Africa pose not only a risk to Africans, but to the world at large because, as Countercurrent puts it, quote, developing countries are seen as a global testing ground for bioweapons, the development of which is then used around the world, unquote. The Russian military operating in Ukraine announced in October that it had recovered documents indicating that the United States was developing dual-use biological research in Africa. The U.S.-based National Research Council defines dual-use biological research as, quote, producing and publishing research within the life sciences that is directed toward or intended to improve public health, but that in the hands of a rogue state, terrorist group, or individual could be used to impair public health, unquote. According to TASS, Chief of Russia's Radiation, Chemical, and Biological Protection Troops, Lieutenant General Igor Kirillov, informed that with support from Metabiota, quote, the Pentagon planned to use the U.S. Army to test unregistered medical drugs on the local population and then submit them for approval by supervisory authorities in the interests of Big Pharma, unquote. Metabiota is a San Francisco startup that U.S. President Biden's son, Hunter, is affiliated with that compiles global data to predict pandemics and epidemics. As reported by TASS, a document found by the Russian military in a Ukrainian biolaboratory marked confidential, quote, demonstrates that the U.S. Defense Threat Reduction Agency and the U.S. Department of Homeland Security were involved in the study of pathogens in African countries, while the U.S. Agency for International Development and several European Union agencies were engaged to make these activities look like humanitarian cooperation, unquote.